Shalom and welcome to Biblical Faith with Sam Peak. We invite you to join us as Sam brings a study in the Torah from the Jewish sages. And now our speaker, Sam Peak.
Shalom Aleichem, peace upon you. Welcome to the program. Let's get right into it. We've been talking for a little while, one program I think, about the Torah Shebe'al Peh. And the last time we left off, we were talking about what is in the Masorah, and let's do some more of that, okay? If I don't get over here and get started, then I'll waste time. The Torah Shebe'al Peh, let's write this here, and I'm probably writing it too small, but these are terms that you really need to come to realize. The oral Torah, well, I can't even spell today, y'all forgive me. I'm trying to write too small, and I know if I use up my board, I can't get everything I want on here. And then the Torah She Bichtav, which is the written. Okay? And then we were talking about some of the things that were in the Masorah. And these, by the way, are all contained, everything that we're listing here is all contained actually in the written text and written in the fence, that goes around the text, okay? The Masorah. So far we had got to this. Let's start again. Number one is the script. And we'll come back and talk about this maybe some more, but the script, the actual shape of the letters is important. And I have something pretty amazing to show you on that a little later on. Then the parshiot, which are the portions, the division of the portions and the order in which we read them in the synagogue. They're read in 52 weeks. Today they're read in a year, 1 year. But in the days when the temple was standing, 154 weeks, which is much longer. Number three. Oops, have to turn the page here. I'm getting these, by the way. This is a compilation by Rabbi Cardozo. It's absolutely excellent. The nekudot, which is dots that are placed above. Now, most people think of, if you studied Hebrew, they think the nekudot are the vowels. But it's more than that. It's the dots that are placed above certain letters. Okay? Then we left off with the ketarim, which is the crowns. Now listen, it's a verse that we're going to come to later on in the New Testament, where someone has accused Yeshua of destroying the law, the Torah, all right? And he says, don't think that I've come to destroy the Torah or the prophets. I haven't come to destroy them, but to fulfill them. These are two words that we need to realize. These words, by the way, are rabbinic. To destroy is a rabbinic word which means wrongly, to interpret, wrongly interpret. To fulfill, and we'll mention this some more because this is something we really want to look at, means to rightly interpret. Now, what's interesting is Yeshua goes on to get into a real rabbinic discussion, and he uses phraseology that is in Mishnaic Hebrew that comes right out of the Mishnah. And he uses the same arguments that are there. It's pretty amazing. We'll look at this more and more. But then he goes on and he says, heaven and earth will pass away before one jot or one tittle of the Torah will pass away. This also is a rabbinic saying. Now, there's an argument over what is the jot and what is the tittle. There's really not an argument over the jot. The jot is this letter, a yud, which I didn't make very well. But the tittle, there's an argument about. Some people think it is the crowns, the ketarim. You'll see Torah scrolls that are decorated with crowns on certain letters, okay? A sheen is one of them. And a lot of people think, and I don't know which one I stand in. It doesn't really matter because either one of them I think are correct. But a lot of people think that this is the tittle, the crown. Even the crowns won't pass away. Well, the ketarim is part of the Masorah, which is the crown. Other scholars think that the tittle is this. Like there is only what's called, it's called a coats. A coats, which means a thorn. There's only a thorn's difference between certain letters in Hebrew. For instance, this is a dalet, this is a resh. This is a D, this is an R. Do you see the only difference? The only difference between them is this thorn, if you will, this coats on the end. So perhaps that's what he's talking about. He's either talking about this or he's talking about the crowns. But whichever one, the point he is trying to get across to us and across to his listeners then is that nothing is going to pass away from the Torah until it's all, and really nothing is ever going to pass away from the Torah. It's wrong for us to think that, okay, once he fulfills all of the Torah, then it passes away. That's not what he's trying to say. His whole point is that nothing ever passes away. Nothing is ever done away with or diminished from or destroyed in the Torah. It's eternal, just as God is eternal. Just as the Messiah is eternal. It's eternal. Okay, the Ketarim, the crowns. Let's go on. Okay, number 5, the 5th thing that's in the Masorah. And by the way, Masorah is now really a term that's used for the entire oral Torah. It's a term that covers everything that's involved in it. Okay. We're kind of in a hurry here because of our subject is so vast. The otiot, memu, oops. It would help very much if I wouldn't misspell letters, or words. Memu yanot. This is isolated letters. Otiot is letters. Memu yanot is they're isolated. Certain isolated letters that are in the text. It refers also to how certain portions of the Torah are set apart. For instance, in Bamidbar, y'all know what that is? Bamidbar, that's Numbers in the wilderness, the book of Numbers, 10, 35 through 36, they are set apart by isolated letters. It's a section that's set apart. Well, why is it set apart? Well, the oral Torah tells us that these, and the way it's set apart, by the way, is like this. Okay. Do we know this is a regular noon, okay, in Hebrew? Well, sometimes we will be reading the text and then we will come into contact with an inverted noon. It's backwards. And this will be at the front of a passage and at the end of a passage. Well, when we run into this otiot memuyanot, this isolated letter, it's telling us that this section, which is set off this way, is actually it belongs somewhere else. It belongs somewhere else. Belongs elsewhere. And then we have to look in the Masorah to tell us where this section originally belongs. Why do we keep it where it's at? Because the Torah scroll that we copied from, it was there in this place, and then there will be an interpretation or or the history of this move and why it's where it's at and why it's been moved. Okay, that's one of the things. Number 6, otiot. Otiot is letters. Otiot gedolot. Those of you who know Hebrew already know that's big letters. And otiot ketanot. Big and small letters. For instance, and we'll find that a lot in certain places. For instance, in the Torah scroll, in the opening of the scroll, at the very first word in the scroll is Bereshit. The bait will be much larger than the rest of the letters, okay? It's much larger, so this is a big letter. Other places, for instance, in the scroll of Esther, we looked at that not too long ago when we did a program on Purim. Other letters, like in the names of the sons of Haman, are written very, very small. They'll come in here and write it very, very small. And we see other examples of that. So in the Masorah are all of these letters. Oh, by the way, in the Masorah, it's going to count. And this is part of scribal work on how they keep the transmission of the Torah accurate. And I know we taught this quite some time ago, but we're always picking up new people, and which is why I go back in explanations on so many things so much. It's for the new people, but it's also for the old people too, you know. How do we learn all this stuff in Judaism? Repetition, repetition, repetition. In fact, you know, Mishnah, the Mishnah itself, the oral tradition, how was the oral tradition preserved? By repetition, from mouth to ear, repetition over and over and over again, and then transmitted to the next generation and to the next. So it doesn't hurt us too much to do a little repetition. But and the Mishnah, the word Mishnah is actually from the second. It's a word that's used to speak of repetition. That's how it was passed down. It was passed down by always repeating. Okay. Words that are written what's called malé, full, are chaser, defective. Chaser, defective. So some words will be written full, and to give you an example of that, let's see. Oh, see if they give me one here. Oh yeah. Sukkot. This is the word Sukkot. Sometimes in the text it will be written this way. Other times in the text it will be written without this vav. And this is malé, this is full. This is the full writing of the word, but it will be written without this vav. Okay, and this is chaser. It's defective, or in other words, it's missing a letter. Anytime that happens, what do we say? Oh, well, they just misspelled a word? No. There's a reason that it's written full, or a reason that it's written defective. It has a lesson to teach us. It has information to give us. It has something to get across, and this is part of the Torah Shebe'al Peh. Okay, let's see. How many more we got? 3 more. We'll move over here. Keri and ketiv. What that simply means is words that are pronounced at variance with the way they are written. Some words are written, and I don't know how to make a short explanation of that, and I didn't bring an example. But you'll go along in the Torah, and you'll find that it is written. This word, such and such a word, may be written a certain way, but then they will have here, but it is pronounced, it is read, that's what keri means, written ketiv, a certain way, but we have a different tradition on the way it is actually pronounced. And we follow the tradition on how it is pronounced, okay? And this is also listed in part of the Masorah. Okay. Number 9 is the order of the books. The order of the books. Because, let me read what the rabbi says here, what Rabbi Cardozo says. He says, because that order originates with Moshe, some authorities, some rabbinical authorities, maintain that the laws can be derived from the juxtaposition or the position of paragraphs and verses. Even those who disagree, and this is something we're going to find out, in the oral Torah, the majority rules, but there is usually also a minority opinion. That's that old joke, on 2 Jews, 3 opinions, that kind of a deal, and that we never agree about anything. So what? That also is part of the oral Torah. And we have a few things to share with you on that too later on down the line. So get ready. What we're really doing is kind of immersing you in some real beyond simple Bible exposition, trying to immerse you in some real rabbinical type training, and just to give you a taste of it, of that world. You know why? Because that is the world. Why would we do that for Christians? Why would we do that for Christian believers? Because that is the world of Jesus. That is the world of Yeshua. He worked in this world that we're listing and talking about right now. He walked in it. He talked in it. He thought in it. All of those things. So that's why we're doing this, just hopefully so we have a better understanding. Anyway, even those who disagree with this opinion accept this opinion in regard to Devarim, since this book was recorded all at one time. Okay, now I know that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us, but what they're talking about is there's an argument on the order of the books. In other words, the order of the Torah that Moses wrote. Did he write Genesis first? Did he write Exodus first? Or where, in which did he write? They don't argue over Devarim. Devarim is Deuteronomy, because we know that Moshe wrote this book all at one time, at one sitting, okay? So that's the argument there. Number 10, and this is the last one, is the order of the Torah readings in the synagogue. Now, we talked about that under Parshiot, and that's really not what it is, though. That's the portions, the way the Torah is divided for reading. But what is the order that we read? The order that we read. And that is recorded for us in the Masorah. Okay, in fact, I'm confusing here, I'm sure, because really under Parshiot, we should have only put the portions, and I should have shown you how they're divided. This information we should have went down here to number 10, okay? While we're talking about that, let's go back and let me show you, because I know some of you have Hebrew Bibles at home. And some of you have ordered the Tanakh, and it has Hebrew on one side and it has English on the other side. And some of you have even perhaps learned Hebrew, and you're beginning to read more and more from the Hebrew side, and you're going to run into some things in that side over there that maybe need some explanation. So we have, in the Parshiot, we have two kinds of divisions. We use chapter and verse divisions today, even though that really is of Catholic origin. It's still a very, very handy way in order for us to be able to find what we're looking for very quickly. But that really comes from a non-Jewish origin. Let me find where he's talking about. Okay. There are two types of division. One is called Petuach, which means open. It's an open division. And it is indicated in a printed version by this letter. You will see this letter, a pei, sticking in. If the verses have some kind of a connection, in other words, if this Torah portion connects to the next Torah portion, there will be a space of 6 letters. You'll have this pei and then a space, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You'll have a space of 6 letters before the next portion begins, okay? Then, let's see. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. Excuse me. I'm telling you completely and totally wrong. Patuach, open, and this here is if the two divisions, the two parshiot, have no connection in their subject matter, then this space extends. Well, excuse me. Hold on. Okay. There is a Jewish tradition found in the Masorah of sectional divisions based on the contents of the verses. This division is made in the Torah scrolls by leaving an empty space between the end of one verse and the beginning of the next. If the two verses have no connection in their subject matter, that space extends until the end of the line. In other words, if there's no connection, the open space will go all the way to the end of the line, all right? And then we begin the next portion of the Torah down here, all right? This type of division is called Petuach, open, and is indicated in printed editions by the letter Pei, this letter right here. All right, if the verses have some connection, we will still have the Pei. No, excuse me. If the verses have some connection, a space the width of 9 letters. So we would have 9-letter space between this portion and the next portion, and then we would have the letter samek, which means stuma, which means closed. All right? He goes on, there are 669 sectional divisions in the Torah, 290 of them are open, and 379 are closed. All right. And somebody says, okay, we've had enough of that. What does it matter? Well, it does matter, though. There is a reason why the sections of the Torah are left open or why they're left closed. And so it does matter. Okay, let's go on. Let's stop for a moment and think. Why in the world do we need, would we even need an oral Torah? We have the written text, so why in the world do we have to have and I don't even really like to use the word tradition, because this gets into some sticky things, simply because the oral Torah is more than a tradition. It's very, very much more than that. It is the way, based on the hermeneutical rules that are established by the oral Torah. In fact, the hermeneutical rules are very much a part of the oral Torah. And the reason we have them is, let's tell this story. There is a story, it's Agadah, a story that's in the Talmud, that talks about how, in Jewish tradition, the oral Torah goes all the way back to Moses and Mount Sinai. It is just as much revelation from God as what was written by Moses in the scrolls. So if it goes all the way back to him, then he taught the oral Torah to Joshua, to Yehoshua. Excuse me. When they came in to conquer the land, because of some things, Yehoshua had forgotten part of the oral Torah that Moses had taught him. However, he remembered the rules. He remembered the rules of interpretation. He remembered the hermeneutical rules. And he was able to give them the hermeneutical rules and teach the hermeneutical rules to the sages of Israel, to the rabbis, to the elders. And in this way, because they had the rules, even though they had lost part of the oral Torah because it had been forgotten, because they had the rules, they were able to take the rules and go to the written text of the Torah and recover the oral Torah. Then they went back and told Joshua, is this it? And he says, oh yes, of course that's it. I'd just forgotten, but now that you remind me, that's exactly what Moses told me on that. That is part of the key, and that is part of the dynamic of the oral Torah. It is that if we possess the rules, if we have the hermeneutical rules, then every generation, even if part of the oral Torah is lost, every generation must re-engage itself in the written text of the Torah to constantly be reviewing the oral Torah and learning the Torah that was passed on by mouth, okay? That is part of what makes Judaism alive. That is part of what makes it a continuing study of God and His revelation in the world. Are these rules that we have in order to constantly in every generation reinvent, or not reinvent, but recreate the oral Torah and be able to study it. It keeps us constantly engaged in the Word of God. It's so important. The reason I don't like just the word traditions is because this is a word that is translated in the New Testament, or it comes out translated as traditions. And it is applied, I'll say tradition. But we look at this one place in the New Testament where Yeshua says something very derogatory about the traditions of men. He's not when he says traditions of men there, he is not condemning the entire body of the oral Torah. He absolutely can't be, because he teaches oral Torah all the time. He does it all the time. So what he is doing is he has a problem with something that a person had invented. See, that's our problem with this. We come and we look at the oral Torah as if it's man's idea, as if man invented it. And nothing could be farther than the truth in the Jewish way of thought. In the Jewish way of thought, man didn't invent any of it. It came directly from God. It came from Him. The rules of interpreting the Word of God come from God. He gives us the rules. And it's in this way that we are able to engage in the Torah, that we are able to stay involved in it, and we are able to look and turn to it for everything that we possibly need, and that it is the book of eternal life, because it comes from the mouth of God. That's something. Okay. So I don't like to just say traditions, because somebody will come and say, oh, well, Jesus said, don't pay attention to the traditions of men. When He uses that terminology, the traditions of men, He's not blanket condemnation of the entire oral Torah. That's a pretty ridiculous thing to even think. It really is. But it's only ridiculous if we come to know the Jewishness of Jesus and the rabbinics of Jesus. He is such a rabbi, such a rabbi. So, where are we going from here? We're going to continue in this search, and more things that we begin to talk about and that we begin to see about the oral Torah. And you say, well, you haven't really made sense to me yet. Well, I'm working on it, and we will get it. But I am giving you lots and lots of information that you really need to work and to really be a part of the world of Yeshua, this great rabbi in the first century, and his yeshiva. We'll sit in his yeshiva for a while, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to come to a place where we can really sit down with the text in his yeshiva. I hope you enjoy it. I enjoy it, and I'm having a great time. Hope you are too. Shalom uvracha, peace and a blessing to you. Shalom, shalom.
Thank you for joining us in our study. If you enjoyed this study and are interested in learning more from the Torah and the sages of Israel, then check us out on the internet at www.bfm101.com, or you may contact us toll-free at 1-800-639-0169. Our mailing address is Biblical Faith, P.O. Box 2, Abilene, Texas 79604. Until next time, we wish you shalom uvracha, peace and a blessing.